If you've struggled with your weight long term and you give yourself a hard time for not being able to lose the pounds naturally, then Jennifer Brown's story is really going to resonate with you. The 42-year-old mother of two from Iowa had been overweight since childhood, and at the age of 37, then weighing 342 pounds, she decided to make a major change. She took up running as well as changing her diet, and within 3 years she lost an impressive 100 pounds and has gained an Instagram following, inspiring others with her fitness transformation. But as she's about to tell us, her progress in losing weight stalled, and her doctor suggested she take the GLP-1 weight loss drug Mounjaro, which reduces appetite, to help her reach her target. I'm Clare Johnston, a journalist exploring how to age well, and in today's interview, Jennifer will share her weight loss journey and explain why, despite doing so much to lose the weight naturally, she believes GLP-1 drugs like Mounjaro and Ozempic are a lifeline for her and others facing a similar challenge. Just as Oprah Winfrey said that starting on a GLP-1 drug finally made her realize the truth about thin people, Jennifer's story suggests weight struggles are often not just about willpower. Jennifer, thank you so much for joining me from Iowa today and for being willing to share your inspiring story with us as well.
Thank you for having me. I'm really excited to be able to talk, share, and hopefully maybe inspire someone that, feels like they're needing to change or wanting to find a way to change, that it's very possible.
Oh, you absolutely will. It's a story often with weight, it doesn't start suddenly. It's a story that kind of builds up over a lifetime. And so I thought the best place to start would be with your childhood, if you wouldn't mind taking us back there and when you first became aware of your weight being a negative in your life.
I can remember the very first time weight ever became a thought in my head, and it was when I was 6. My sister was just born. I was holding her, and I was actually at the hospital with my mom in this picture. And, she's here cradled in my arms, and here I'm smiling real big. And my grandma made a comment saying, "Well, your chins are, you only have one chin in this picture. You're really starting to slim out." And I guess I never really thought much about it, until after the fact. And really it was like, well, I guess I didn't realize that that was a problem. And, I always say, to be fair, I feel like a lot of that, projection from our older generation came from given to them, like our older generation had that. And so it was just normal and natural for them to pass that on without realizing how much damage it could do. And then from that point forward, I knew that I was just never considered quote unquote normal, if that makes sense. I'd always just been one of the bigger girls in the room. I was always fairly tall, and I carried weight well, but it was, gradually I just continued to put weight on, and I got bigger and bigger as time went on.
And so you first remember hearing that and having that awareness at 6. I mean, what would you say your weight was in comparison to other kids in your class or whatever at that stage? When did it start to feel like a real issue for you, do you think?
I was just a little bit pudgier than the girls. And I, like just my arms were just always a little bit more full. I just noticed that like I was not the same as my friends, I guess.
Within your family, I mean, what was your diet like at that stage?
We ate like a traditional, like meat and potatoes, for dinner, that kind of thing. There was a lot of misconception though. My mom grew up in a house of 10 kids. And they didn't have a lot of extra money. And so they made very large meals when they did, but they were always on a budget, and they were relying on different aspects of how they were going to have meals. And so they probably didn't always make the healthiest choices. And that kind of filtered into our family. My parents divorced when I was very young, and then my mom remarried. My stepdad had 2 daughters, and then I had 2 sisters. So I grew up in a family where I started off as an only child, and then all of a sudden I had all these extra siblings, and we ended up having a fairly large family as well. And we made a lot of food so that nobody would go hungry. I think my mom had that concept also, like we always need to plan to have a little bit more of everything. But then when we would have dinner, and I never felt a feeling of like satisfaction while eating, I would get the talk of, you really don't need to eat seconds. And like, do you feel like you really need that? And I'm looking back on it now. Of course, I didn't really need it, but I also was using food as an emotional crutch.
I wonder if you have a theory, because there's different schools of thoughts. You hear that some of us are just genetically predispositioned to not feel satiated after a meal, which is where these weight loss drugs like Ozempic and so on are so helpful. And I'm wondering if you think that that was maybe an issue for you, or whether it was more about the fact that you were maybe just slightly bigger as a child and people flagging it to you then put something in your mind, that kind of destructive thinking that you were talking about, where because they've kind of flagged as an issue, oh, you shouldn't really have that. It makes you want it, because if somebody says, well, you shouldn't be having that, then it drives the whole desire.
Yes, absolutely. I honestly, I can tell you, I think it's a combination of both for me. Everyone in my family has had to work very hard to maintain weight loss, and it has been an issue. So, number one, I think I had that going against me without realizing and not knowing, based on research that I've done for myself now, not knowing back then that that was a factor, because no one ever really used that and said, "Oh, it's your genetics are causing this for you." Like, this is an actual condition that you can get treatment for, because I'm 43 years old, and that would have been the mid 90s when that was the case. And in the mid 90s, everybody needed to be stick thin or you had no value in life. So that was what I had to go off of when it came to body image and how I, portrayed food. Like I wasn't going to just starve myself, because I couldn't do that even if I tried. Like, those thoughts about food never went anywhere. But I also didn't help myself by trying to make an effort to be better at calculating food. So I think it was kind of a double-edged sword, where I had genetics stacked against me, but also I wasn't putting in any effort. I was just using it as an emotional crutch, because food helped numb any kind of emotion or pain that I felt if I was frustrated in life. And I would always just resort to food, and I didn't think about it. It's a lot of education that is never actually given
Yeah.
out. And that's the frustrating part, is that, you go to a medical provider who actually doesn't get that education themselves as in depth as they should when they're advising people on this. And so that's the other frustration too. It's like, you can tell people all day, every day, diet and exercise is the way to achieve this goal, which those both play very large factors. But how do you diet and how do you exercise? Because then you leave people in a place where they're having to go discover on their own, and there's so much misinformation.
100%. It's like the kind of diet food that I was given as a teenager, or people would say, eat this to lose weight, would be, very low fat, things that not a lot. There was no talk around protein then. So it was all sort of like large bowls of pasta with a low-fat tomato sauce. And then, we'd wonder why we didn't lose weight. And there was just no understanding of what it would take to feel satiated after a meal. The whole foods discussion really wasn't being had back then. So it was tougher, definitely, I think, to control your weight in the days before we really had good food information. How did it play out for you in your teens and 20s? So you've already had this coming through from childhood, this kind of sense of shame around food and not being able to control what you eat, as well as everybody else around you. Or I'm guessing that was the sort of sense. I mean, how did it play out as you grew up?
I ended up becoming more of a closet binge eater, where we would eat dinner as a family, and then I would be 16 and have my car and be able to drive. And if I like had whatever reason, I just never felt like I was filling whatever void I needed to fill, I would go to a restaurant and order a full meal and eat on top of that. And like, I think there's such a huge misconception about people who are obese or overweight, that all they do is sit and just eat all day. And it's like, honestly, I probably did overall eat less than many people would expect. And I did a lot of restricting to try to make this all better. But then that would all kind of bubble over, and then something would happen. And then I would go and I would overeat to a point where I was so uncomfortable, or then I would have a couple of days stretch where I would just not pay any sort of attention and just eat anything I wanted. That would end up being my demise, is that I would just pick very high calorie foods, and I might eat only one or two of those items, but that in itself would be enough to like fill an entire day. And then if I felt like binge eating, I would eat on top of that. I never paid any sort of attention to like, oh, you should take a pause and like maybe not have any more food. It was always just do whatever you want, have whatever you want. That will make you feel better. And it never did, but
Yeah. And how did that end up making you feel about yourself?
I I have always had a level of confidence that has surprised a lot of people, but a lot of that was faking it. I faked a lot of confidence because, and I was always the kind of person that I would point out the obvious so that other people couldn't. I know that I'm fat, so you can point it out to me all you want to. It's not going to hurt my feelings. When the fact of the matter is, it definitely hurt my feelings because I desperately wanted to be different. I wanted to just be quote unquote normal. And I mean, I hate saying that because there is no normal. There isn't. But I didn't want attention for my body size. I wanted attention for the fact that I was a singer, and like I did, so I would overcompensate in everything that I did to make up for the fact that I was in a bigger body. So I always tried really hard to like be really smart about things. I really always tried to like kind of overachieve at all the things that I could do to control around me because I felt like I couldn't control this portion of my life. And that started early. That was an early age issue. There were times where my mom would try to have conversations about it. There would be times where my mom would force me to go for walks with her because I think her whole intent was that, well, somebody's got to make you do it. It's just like you said earlier, pressuring someone to do things really and truly just makes them not want to, because it has to be up to me to make that change. But she would progressively try. I mean, there was a couple of times where we had conversations and it didn't go the way that she wanted it to, simply because she wanted me to make change and I wasn't ready for that. I wasn't willing to listen because I wasn't wanting to make the change then. I mean, I had too many other things to deal with first emotionally.
To give us some context, so by the time you were in your 20s and so on, where was your weight then?
In my 20s, I was probably maybe around like 230 to 250. And that was like, I mean, every year I've gradually gained more and more. It's not that I just never tried anything or that I just never cared. I always tried. You go through your whole life as a person, especially a person in a larger body, making some sort of effort for like 2 weeks. And I would do that regularly. And there were a couple of times where I saw a lot of progress because I would make sure I was exercising by walking regularly. And then, I mean, I always had an idea of what the right tools were, or the right things to put together were, except for food. Food was always the thing I could never figure out because I had such an all or nothing mindset about it. I was 33 or 34. I got pregnant, and I remember just feeling like, oh my gosh, like I'm not in a healthy state at all. And I ended up having a miscarriage my first pregnancy. And the first thought I had was that I did that because I wasn't in a healthy space. And I know now that that is not the case, that's not true, but it's really hard not to blame yourself as a woman, and especially when it's pointed out by medical providers and pointed out by the whole world that like obesity is not a good way to be pregnant. And so again, a lot of misinformation and self-negative thoughts, I guess, I don't know if that's the right way to say that, led me to that point. And so then after that was kind of where I got to that place of like, okay, I've got to figure this out. Like, I wanted to be a mother, and I was, reasoning with anyone and everything. And I remember praying and saying, like, I will do my absolute best if you give me the chance. Now, I have a stepdaughter. She was 3. I was her mom at the time, but I wanted to have that experience for myself as well.
So when did you get married? What age were you when you got married? And
My husband and I met when I was 25, or no, 24, and I got married when I was 28.
and did that help with your confidence? Finding love and getting into a relationship. Do you think that was beginning to feed into feeling a bit more confident about yourself, or not really?
I feel like at the time that my husband and I met, I was kind of at a place where I was starting to really work on myself with my mental state. And like, I was just going to say to myself, you can be in this space that you're in right now. You can be in the body that you're in right now and still love your life. Like, I was just kind of like establishing that I was not going to have a relationship with somebody or be with somebody just to have a relationship, that it was going to be meaningful, or else I was going to be by myself. And that was one thing that I feel like I really did right as a woman. I spent time by myself, and I had my own apartment, and I learned that I could live independently on my own. I feel like that really did help me work on myself to prepare me for this, but I'm a very late bloomer when it comes to all things. My husband is my absolute best friend. The fit was just so perfect between the two of us that like I never even thought about or looked at anyone else. But one other aspect to all of this is that 6 months into us dating, he was diagnosed with melanoma. So I immediately started our relationship with kind of an attitude of like, I've got to help take care of him. That would end up becoming a kind of a focal point throughout the next several years of my life, was focusing on taking care of other people, because he ends up having to have 2 surgeries and do a year full of like a chemotherapy treatment. And I remember my mom saying to me, you either need to stand by his side and be as supportive as possible, or you need to let him do this on his own and not waste his time. So you need to make a decision. And I was kind of like, well, I love this guy, and obviously best decision, but he's had a lot of health issues that have really and truly made me think about myself. So
How is he now, your husband?
he has like 250 lives, because at age 41 he had a heart attack.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, he's had a few other health issues. He's doing great. I mean, he continues to thrive and is out. He's an avid golfer, and he's doing things like he's working on trying to get healthy himself. And but yeah, like a lot of like scary moments with him, and us having kids together, that was the point for me.
So that sounds like you had your, did you say you had your first child around 33?
I had my first pregnancy around then. That was when I had lost that pregnancy. And then I ended up having Maddox in 2014, and he's 10. In that in between time, because of the fact that I said to myself, like, oh, you contributed to this with your size not being healthy, I decided that I was going to do whatever I needed to do at that point. I went through probably about 5 months of time between my miscarriage and getting pregnant with Maddox, of really working on getting healthy. And I lost about 45 pounds during that stretch of time. I was working out, I was exercising, I was learning how to focus on food, trying to document or food journal, keeping track. But then I got pregnant. The craziest story about that is I remember I was out working out with a friend on the morning that I found out I was pregnant. And I said, I don't want to get pregnant until I've lost about 100 pounds. I want to feel like I'm, in the right space. Well, that same day I had found out I was pregnant, but fear crept in, and I didn't want to jeopardize that. And, you hear back and forth, like, you shouldn't exercise, just rest, do all the. And that hard work that I had put in kind of just went away because I was terrified to do anything to jeopardize this pregnancy. I know now that I could have kept going and probably would have been successful. During that pregnancy with Maddox, I was diagnosed with gestational diabetes. That was a precursor. That's a precursor to type 2 diabetes. That's an indication that you're probably going to have issues with blood sugar as you age. And so I had to be on 2 vials of insulin per week up until I gave birth. And I had to do non-stress tests. So my pregnancy ended up being considered high risk because of that. I had Maddox, and after I had him, the craziest thing was I had gotten down to about 260 for weight. And I thought, okay, well, I'm at a really good place. I'm just going to keep building on that. But he needed me as his mom. And so I put him first. And ended up putting myself on the back burner once again. And that is actually when my weight started really creeping up. And I ended up getting to my heaviest I was 37. So there had been about 4.5 years time. At age 37, I was at my heaviest, which was 342. So I had put on quite a bit of weight then.
And how did you feel at 342? I mean, what did that feel like day to day? I mean, were you tired? Was it affecting your, your joints and how active you were with the kids, or how were you feeling day to day?
I have a couple of little clips. Like I didn't have a lot of video clips from back when I was that heavy, but I do have one where Maddox was sitting on the floor and I had to kind of reach to get him. But I remember like having to use the floor, or the side of the couch to stand up. Daily living was hard. Walking up and down the stairs, I was out of breath. Like I would dread going up to the upstairs of my home because of the fact that I was out of breath.
At 37, that's no age.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And like carrying my son around with me because, when I was 37, he was 4, but like wanting to do stuff because he's still busy. Like I remember there was one day and this story still kind of haunts me a little bit where I think he was probably 2 or 3 years old. We went to a friend's lake house and we were sitting down by the water and he just jumped in and he kind of struggled. And my friend jumped in to save him, because I wasn't quick enough to get to that spot of where I could just jump in and get him.
Oh, that's so hard.
And I thought about that a lot. Like, what am I doing? I mean, how am I doing this? Number one, I can't actually do what I want to do as a mom and have a quality life with my kids. I kept thinking about what happens if something happens to Jeff, my husband. What do we do? Because I'm not in a great healthy space, and he's had a lot of health issues. That who's gonna care for our child? And I didn't want to leave that responsibility on my daughter, who's just now 23 years old, and but at the time she was still in high school.
So was that a bit of a turning point?
That was absolutely the turning point. It's so funny because people will always say to me, like, what was the moment? Like, what was your moment? And I can remember exactly. We were actually out at a park. Maddox was 4.5, and I was at my heaviest weight, but I had decided, like, okay, I have to make change. But I wasn't acting upon it. I was just thinking about it. And that day when we went, we took our dog and it was a beautiful day. And I thought to myself, like, I had this feeling kind of wash over me of contentment. And it was, it wasn't like I had some major epiphany or anything, but it was just, I felt at peace for the first time in a long time. And I thought, if this is giving me this feeling, I want more of it.
Mm-hmm. Just being outdoors.
Yeah. And being able to be active with my son. Like, it wasn't anything major, but I was able to kind of like, we went for a little hike and he was pointing different things out. He was like, oh, look at this or look at that. And I just thought, okay, I want to build on this. I want to keep doing this. And for no other reason, it wasn't about looking different this time. It wasn't about me needing to get approval from anyone else. It was just about me wanting to be a mom playing with my kid on a regular basis. And that was the day I was like, okay, I have learned that I can't push myself so hard for a week and expect change. This time, I'm just going to keep doing all the things no matter what else happens in my life. And whether I see change or not, I'm just going to keep doing it. And so then I started off, I knew I could drink water and I knew that I was in a good place to be able to walk a little bit. I was thinking about food and I was thinking about that part of it. And I probably did start food journaling again, realizing that was effective. But I didn't full-fledged learn the things that I've learned now until I kind of moved through it, if that makes sense.
Were you drinking a lot of sugary drinks before? So was switching to water, drinking more water in itself a really good starting point?
I've always liked water. I was always good with water. I always drank water, but I did drink a lot of soda or like full sugar drinks, and I didn't pay attention to what I was drinking. Now, at the most, I have a cup of coffee with a little bit of creamer in the morning, and actually I'm still sipping on it now, but and then I drink water most of the day. Every once in a while, at the current point, I'll have a Diet Pepsi or something to that effect, but it's pretty rare.
Yeah. So that was probably a bigger switch than you probably even realized at the time. Just sticking with the water, dumping everything else. Yeah.
I recently started doing some one-on-one online coaching, and part of that thing that I say is you can still have the things you enjoy. It's just creating a smaller version of that. And so I started doing that for myself, adopting that. Like, if you really want something, fine, have it. Just maybe have half of it, or, stop buying the full large sizes of everything, and know that you can have anything you want at any point in time. I had to take a lot of control away from food, but that didn't come until after I started moving through this. So at the very beginning, it was just start drinking water only instead of adding in pop, cut that out, and then focus on walking regularly. And it started making a change. Like, I started seeing change right off the bat. Like, the weight started falling off a little bit.
Wow. And then where did you take it from there? Because I see that now that you do a lot of running.
Yeah. Yeah. So progressively, I just kept doing a little bit more and more. I told people that I was a person, I don't like to work out with people. And I didn't, because I didn't want to feel embarrassed by not being fast enough, or being a heavy breather, or, my face being real red. So I liked to do it by myself because I didn't want people to have to see that. I'm realizing now that once I ripped that Band-Aid off and I started letting people see inside my world, that it ended up making it easier just to be like, yep, this is who I am and this is what I do. And sometimes my face does get red and sometimes I do breathe heavy, but I started taking a spin class with a friend of mine, and I did that once and was like, wow, this is actually a lot of fun. So I added that in, and then I met people when I was doing that. And so when we met up, we would say, hey, do you guys want to come and have a workout session at the gym this day? I started just gradually adding in things that I had never done before, just to try new experiences. And as I did that, I was like still working out on my own, walking outside, and the temperature turned cold. And so I said to my husband, hey, I know that it seems kind of strange, but I'm ready to like look at getting some kind of an indoor treadmill. And so we went to Walmart and we found one on clearance, and I just Googled to make sure that the weight at the time, I think I was weighing about 270. And I just wanted to make sure that that was going to be okay for me to walk on, because that's all I needed it for. And we got it, put it in the basement, and I used it very, very regularly. I would go downstairs and walk during the wintertime, and I put on a TV show, and I'd say things like, okay, you're only going to watch this show while you're walking. So if you're really into the show, you got to keep walking to watch it. And I'd make little deals with myself, like I, again, just kept progressing. And then one day I got to a place where I'm like, hey, what if you tried to run? Like, just what if you tried? And it's so funny because I was always the kid like that walked with the PE teacher, because we used to have to do this physical fitness test where you had to run a mile and like do pull-ups and push-ups to see if you could just do it. And I was like, nope, I'm never going to run ever. Like, I'm not even trying to run the first part of it because I know I can't. And then I thought, well, that would be a good challenge for yourself. Like, just see. And I was like, okay, well, I'm going to do this every day for 30 days just to see if I can make the
But
time
what was that
improve.
first run like? So you really weren't used to running at all. And then all of a sudden you
Yeah.
were running on your treadmill. I mean, how did that feel? Both physically, but also mentally. How did it feel?
It was hard, first of all, and I felt that lung burn where I was like, oh gosh. But I thought it felt really good when I was done, because I was like, wow, I did that. I can't believe I just did that. That was
Can
the
you
finish
remember
part.
how long you ran for that first time? So like,
Oh gosh, it was over 20 minutes. I
woo!
mean, I'm pretty sure, yeah, because like I could walk a mile faster than I could run it, because I had told myself, like, I'm not gonna worry so much about how long this first mile takes. I'm just gonna do the motion until my watch says a mile. Because I was tracking my exercises on my Apple Watch at the time. And, even just the running motion itself, like, you're exerting yourself more through the running motion, even if you're still going the same pace as a walking pace. It's all in the way you move your body. That in itself was just like, okay, I did this. So like, I'm going to see every day if maybe I can shave a couple seconds off. I mean, that's kind of where that whole run a mile a day thing started for me. And now it's like, holy crap, I'm a runner.
Yeah, amazing. And how much do you run now?
So on Friday, I ran 5 miles. I broke it up on Friday. I average right now during the off season, I'm averaging about 15 to 20 miles a week.
Yeah, I mean, that sounds a lot to me.
I last year, um, I ended up setting some pretty serious goals for myself. I progressed into running, and last year I ran a 5K in 2023 for the first time and thought, gosh, this was kind of fun. And I got a medal for it. Then I did another one. And then in 2024, the very beginning of the year, I made a list of things I wanted to try. And on that list, I wrote run a half marathon this year, which is 13.1 miles. And so I trained for that. That happened in May. I ran that half marathon. And then I found out that there was a full marathon on my 43rd birthday. And I thought, this year, of all the things I could try, like what's double a half marathon? And don't let me fool you, that half marathon was the hardest thing I had ever done up until I decided I was going to do a marathon. So on my 43rd birthday, I ran a full marathon this last year. So in 1 year, I ran a half marathon and a full marathon, which
Wow, that's a lot. My son, who's 20, ran his first marathon last year. And we were standing at the finish line watching people coming through. And I mean, it is a lot. The training that he put into that, how hard it was on him, age 20. Total respect to you. And that is a hard challenge.
Well, thank you. It's something that I've repeatedly said to myself over and over, that I did this, and no matter what, whether I ever do it again, which I'm not really sure that a full marathon will be my favorite race. It has allowed me to continue to see that, like, hey, you can keep going at this, and running is something that you enjoy, and mentally the clarity I get from it and that feeling of contentment that I get from it comes every time I go for a run. Even if I have to force myself to do it, because you still get to a place where you're like, oh, I gotta go do this. Like, I gotta go do this. I don't really want to, but I have to. And like, then I get out and do it, and I'm like, I can't believe I said I didn't want to. This feels so good. But it's been a lot of years to get myself here.
Well, yeah, and let's try and put a timeline on that again. I mean, you've lost 200 pounds in total, is that right?
Yeah, 190 if we're being exact.
It's incredible. Over what time period?
That day that I was explaining to you, I really kind of consider that my start day, and that was in July of 2019. And then I would say that I've been at maintenance for about 1.5 years now. And so I'm not really great about like setting out the exact time.
Yeah, but no, that gives us absolutely enough. Yeah.
Overall, this whole journey has been around 7 years at this point, 6.5, 7 years that I've been moving through.
And you did the water swap, which just sounds like a massive difference. But did you make major dietary changes over that period as well?
I learned that you get more value out of better foods. And what I mean by that is, when you eat, you can have absolutely anything that you want. You can eat a processed food, you can eat McDonald's, you can have anything. It's all in keeping track of how much the calorie intake is. I know there's a lot of misconception about the calories in and calories out, and it's not even about that. But at the end of the day, science proves that you have to pay attention to how much you're consuming based on what you're burning. Like, there's no other answer to that. Now, when people talk about the hormone aspect, and this is just the research I've done for myself. Obviously, I'm not a doctor. But I really was interested. So I went and did a lot of like thinking about this and like learning about this, because I think that there is some truth to the fact when people say things like, well, it's not calories, it's your hormones. At the end of the day, it's always calories for the weight loss, for the scientific portion of weight loss. But every body is different, genetically made up, and you have different aspects of that to get you to where you're able to control the calories in, calories out kind of thing. And maybe that's hormones, and maybe that's getting blood sugars in check, and maybe that's whatever you have to do for your body to be internally right, so that you can eat less than you're burning to lose.
Yeah.
If you strip all of the extras away, the weight loss does come from eating less food. And that's just, or I mean, I shouldn't say less food, consuming less calories. That's a fact of it. And It's just how you get yourself to be able to do that is what is important.
And do you think that it was like a kind of compounding factors in that when you were walking, when you were drinking more water, you started to feel better about what you were doing, you started to feel a difference, and therefore it started to get easier to take more control over the calories?
Yeah, for sure. Because I didn't really learn all of this about the calories. I wanted to buy into the fact that maybe it wasn't calories because I wasn't really willing to be super accepting of the fact that I had to change my diet. I think that's a lot of it for people. A lot of people don't really want to have to make that change because food is such a hard thing. It's the food is like the hardest thing for everyone to grasp, that because you have to have it. There's a factor of disordered eating also where people will think that even that small portion is not enough, and like, so it's such a difficult thing to figure out, and it is an individual based process based on how you've lived your life, based on your emotions. You just got to figure out what works for each person.
I mean, you mentioned disordered eating there. I've spoken about this on my channel before, that I had an eating disorder when I was in my sort of early 20s. And I was sort of binging and then throwing up, so bulimic basically. It was on and off. But I mean, would you agree? Because this was, I think, one of the things that helped me get past this was there are certain foods that do set you up to fail. You know, these kind of empty calories, the processed foods that you mentioned, the fast foods, where when you eat them, you just don't feel satiated. Whereas, you know, with your meat and vegetables, it's amazing how much kind of fuller for longer you feel after just eating whole foods. You know,
I definitely agree with that. I definitely
it just
agree.
made it much easier for me to control my food and stop craving as much. Whereas if you're sitting eating ice cream or something like that, it could have equivalent calories. A small amount of ice cream could have equivalent calories to a portion of whole foods in some ways. But after the ice cream, you're not going to feel satiated. You're just going to want to eat more ice cream. And that's kind of something that once that lands with you, it's like, yeah, it just becomes easier to get a grip of your diet.
I totally agree. And I've used the concept of what can you add to make it better instead of what can I take away? Because I've been
And what have you eaten before it as well? What have you lined your gut with before it? You know, that kind of thing.
yeah. And like what can, or if I'm gonna have, the ice cream, what did I do to contribute to making myself feel good ahead of time? And I don't know, Claire, if you've if I've mentioned this, I don't know if I shared it. I have been using a GLP-1 medication for the last 90 pounds of my weight loss. So like the
Okay.
first 100 pounds I did all naturally.
Yep.
And I learned a lot of these things while using that because I did struggle so hard with the food portion of it, and like I always want to make sure I'm very transparent about this entire journey because there's nothing wrong with realizing that you need help or a tool to get you to where you need to be. And it's just been such a I like to preface also by saying there's a right way and a wrong way for everything. And you just have to do your best to really try to focus on the right way to do it for yourself. So like while I'm using a GLP-1 medication, my focus is protein at every meal. In the mornings, my breakfast consists of a yogurt, granola, and an apple most days, or a breakfast bowl like of eggs and ham and some cheese, and then my lunch will be what can I add to it to make it better? So I'll have chicken and a sweet potato and green beans. And then for dinner, it's something similar. I like to keep food very simple. I'm not a big cook. I always strive to eat as much as I can within my calorie range so that I'm feeling satiated, so that my body is getting the nutrients that it needs. Like my concept of this has never been, I'm going to use this medication so that I can starve myself and just not eat. And I think that that is something that needs to be brought to light a little bit more about these, is that the intention for people to use this as a tool has never been for you to just not eat food. It's been for you to get a handle on the way that you can focus on making sure you're eating correct portion sizes and that you're eating wholer, better foods.
To give you a kind of relief from the cravings and out of control eating.
Yes.
And I mean, are you conscious of having to preserve your muscle mass when you're on the weight control
And that's
medication?
another thing too. That all kind of is, it's a person by person basis. I strength train twice a week, and actually in 6 months, my trainer says he thinks I'll be able to do a pull up. And as a person who used to weigh 342 pounds, the fact that I'm on my way to doing a full unassisted pull up is a pretty big deal. I kind of been making jokes with my husband. I said, I'm going to do one of those bodybuilder contests because the definition in my arms, you can see that I've developed quite a bit of muscle, and in my legs as a runner. I mean, I'm opposite of what the conception of a user, a GLP-1 medication patient is that I'm running a lot of miles. I'm eating regular foods like I'm supposed to be, focusing on protein. I'm strength training twice a week, drinking lots of water. All those things in addition to have helped me get to the place that I'm at. Like I mentioned earlier too, like I'm also using it to control blood sugar because of the fact that I have that precursor to type 2 diabetes. I should have probably been diagnosed with it at one point or another and wasn't. That was probably a little bit of neglect on my part and a medical provider's part. But my life is what it is, and I'm just trying to make the best of what I'm doing and where I'm at with what I have around me.
And so, I mean, you dropped an incredible amount of weight, 100 pounds just naturally. And then
Yeah.
at that point, you felt that there was still some work to do on the diet side of things, did you? And just controlling cravings. And that was why you looked to the medication.
I think that we want to work smarter, not harder in every aspect of life except for weight loss. We want people to do it in the hardest way possible for it to actually count. And I will never understand that because I'm like in a world where we have, modern medicine that we have proven works in every other treatment, and we rely on that to get healthy when we have cancer and heart attacks and these other illnesses. Why would we not do what we can to prevent some of that from happening ahead of time by dropping some weight to get yourself to a healthier space? Because a lot of these major illnesses do have the precursor of obesity. And if you could get that into control first, you may avoid having some of these major, cancer and metabolic issues and heart attack. And I thought about that for myself. If I could control these things now while they're just starting to become a problem, that's going to benefit me farther down the road in life. And the body I'm in right now is way more equipped to recover from something like that than I ever was when I weighed 342 pounds.
Do you wish now that do you mind me asking which weight loss drug you're using?
I'm actually currently on a compounded tirzepatide. So it would be similar. I can't say it's the same because they have different agents, but I am using a compound tirzepatide, which is like Mounjaro or Zepbound.
Do you think that you would have benefited, had that been more widely available 5 years ago or so? Do you think that would have been a better starting point? In fact, a better starting point for you 20 years ago. Do you wish it had been available to you then? Or are you glad that you saw how to lose weight without it before starting to take it?
Yeah, I'm actually really happy that things happened the way they did. And I think that the only way I will sustain what I've done is by having that basis of that 3 years of hard work, learning how to change habits first. Because if I wouldn't have done that, and that's another thing I see for people, they kind of jump into using this medication without actually doing any of the extra work, thinking that it's just a magic tool. And really, you have to put forth some effort in order to do it in a healthy, sustainable way. Mounjaro wasn't even FDA approved here in the States until July of 2022. And in September of 2022 is when I actually was prescribed the medication. So I, kind of got in and got to be one of the first people to prescribed it, I guess. I ended up having insurance coverage for a while, and then all of a sudden my insurance said, we're not going to cover it for you anymore. So I had to explore other options, which is why I'm using compounded. And just I pay out of pocket for it.
Okay. And do you intend keeping it going for the foreseeable future? Or have you got a plan about, well, we hear about microdosing now, scaling back, or what's your plan?
Currently, I don't want to, I'm not going to mess with the good thing. And my blood sugar has been right around, it's been between 70 and 80, which is pretty good. considering I've been obese or been in a bigger body and have gradually gotten bigger as I've grown from the time I was so young, I'm a long-term user of this medication. Most likely I will probably be on it for the rest of my life. But the good news is I am no longer on a high blood pressure medication. And everything else internally checks out to be like, all my labs have been come back perfect. So some of the issues that I had before are no longer issues, which is really great.
I mean, you inspire a lot of people on Instagram now by telling the story of your own weight loss journey. Um, what is your message to someone who might be sitting at home at a similar point where you were 5 years ago and just, not knowing where to turn next?
Any little effort you make is going to get you closer to your end goal than just doing nothing. Remaining stagnant does nothing for you, but one step forward will make a difference if you just keep pushing yourself in one way, shape, or form. And I just keep trying to lead by example and keep saying, like, hey, I'm not perfect. I'm just a normal person living in the middle of Iowa, which is like totally rural. But I just want to make sure that I'm showing that you can change, you can make effort. It does take a long time. It is really hard. There's no reason for you to say no to yourself or to just continue to remain still because you can't have it all at once, and anything is better than nothing. I keep saying that over and over again. It's something I wish someone would have really hit into my head when I started this, because that has been the one thing that I figured out that has kept me going, is something is always just better than nothing. And even if it looks sloppy and if it's messy, you're still moving forward.
And what do you think the difference is now in terms of how you feel about yourself?
Oh my gosh. When I first started this, I'm not going to say that it wasn't about vanity, that I didn't want to look different in clothes. But this go round with it, this time where things actually clicked and worked, it was so much deeper than looking a certain way. It was, I want to be able to do things with my family. I want to be able to set a bucket list goal and reach it. I want to be able to hike in a mountain, and I want to, be able to run a marathon. And like, here I'm doing things I never imagined I could, all because I just said, you can. And I believed in it. And I think that in itself makes me feel so much better about who I am, and just like realizing who I actually am as a person. And I'm a lot more capable than I ever give myself credit for. That's for sure.
I bet. And I wonder, for other people who are thinking, right, they're looking at going on a weight loss drug, would your recommendation be that they try to lose weight naturally first, as you did?
I think everybody's journey has to be their own. And I feel like, if a person is struggling and it has been almost impossible, it's just a good idea to do the research for themselves, to go and find out whether or not they think that they could make that change, talk to their doctor, talk to anybody that could help them realize, what the impact is going to be, and then go from there.
Yeah.
I mean, I've seen so many people be successful right off the gate starting it. And then I've seen people do what I've done, similar to what I've done, where they started to lose weight first and then realized, like, okay, I need a little help. I mean, I think at the end of the day, it's whatever works best for you, works best for you.
Wonderful. Well, I'm so glad that you got there in the end, and that you've been able to share your experience with us. Very much appreciated.
Well, thank you so much. I appreciate it too. And I'm really excited to see what happens next.
Me too. Well, Jennifer says she hasn't experienced any unwanted side effects in taking weight loss drugs, but that isn't the case for everyone, with some patients experiencing vomiting and diarrhea and other gastrointestinal problems. And as we learn more about the potential longer-term side effects of using these drugs, including muscle loss, they will of course have to be weighed up against the undoubted benefits of controlling weight and blood sugar for long-term health. Meanwhile, patients are urged to be careful to ensure they're getting enough nutrients, protein and fibre, with the loss of appetite that is associated with these medications. And what Jennifer's story tells us is that using a weight loss drug is not just a lazy way to conquer obesity. For some who've exhausted every option and are working hard to reduce their weight naturally, these drugs are a life-saving therapy that switch off what some users describe as a constant food noise in their head. To watch and listen to more educational stories like Jennifer's, along with frequent interviews with health, skin and fitness experts, then hit subscribe if you haven't already on YouTube, or follow the podcast to keep up with the latest episodes from me. And if you enjoyed this episode, then I've linked to more interviews below with people who've taken control of their health and fitness, and you'll find details about how to follow Jennifer's journey. For more information and advice around how to age well, head over to my website honest.scot. It's linked below, along with a link to sign up to my free monthly newsletter where I round up all my latest content so you don't miss a thing. But for now, thank you for being here today. I'm going to be back at the same time next week with another fascinating transformation story, so I hope to see you then.